All right, let's talk Dallas Cowboys. I'm Nick, and this is our daily Cowboys show. Obviously, disappointing to put it mildly performance on Monday Night Football as the Cowboys head into their bye. We'll get into all of the fallout, all of the news after the game, and what it means going forward. But as we always like to on this channel, get things started with a little stat of the day, a little palate cleanser, if you will. And boy, oh boy, we need some positivity. And I'm going to try and give it to you courtesy of today's stat of the day via a post on X from the Gridiron Grading account. They wrote the top and bottom four PFF graded rookie defenders in their college production score on our final 2025 board. Number one, Jihad Campbell. Number two, Nick Mori. Number three, Donovan Ezeraku for the Cowboys. Number four, Carson Schwessinger. And then their bottom four, Wyatt Black, Shamar Stewart, Barrett Carter, Demetrius Knight Jr. Want immediate impact from rookies, start with college production and go from there. And this was before Monday night where Ezeraku had his first career start. Kudos to the Cowboys for making more personnel changes. We'll talk about that more as we work our way through this video. But Ezeraku getting his first career start. He had been getting the leading reps at the defensive end position basically the past month or so. They finally made the move to put him in the starting lineup. It is much earned, and he showed up with a sack, another pressure to a handful of tackles. I think a solid performance from Ezeraku from his perspective. So congrats to him on his first start, making some plays as well. He is certainly one of the few pieces on this defense that they can build around for the future. Great selection by Dallas in the second round. At the time, it was given an A+ grade. He had a great training camp, continued to work his way to improve throughout the season up to this point. He continues to showcase exactly why the Cowboys are so high on him. He's got a bright future for this team. So Ezeraku, kudos to you. Really good PFF grade. Really good, if you watch the tape. Really good if you look at production. And now he got his first career start. So if you're looking for positivity, I think it begins and ends with number 41 on the Cowboys defense. All right, let's get into the news, and we'll break our way through last night's performance as we go through these reports. This first one is courtesy of Patrick Walker from @Voice of the Star. Jerry Jones says there is no trade that is done right now, but there is one he is leaning towards doing by tomorrow, possibly tonight. Tonight has come and gone. It's tomorrow, so we'll see what happens. And that losing to the Cardinals doesn't mean he still won't. If anything, it means he might entertain doing multiple trades now. We will see what tomorrow brings. The Cowboys are not in sell mode ahead of the trade deadline. I like our nuts and bolts. I don't like what's happening to our nuts and bolts, though. All right, this is in direct contrast to what Jerry Jones said during the day leading up to the game. He said, "Yeah, one trade. We're going to make one trade for sure. Maybe multiple trades." It made it sound like one trade was already basically a done deal. They just hadn't sent in the paperwork. They didn't, sign the final signature, which I thought was interesting. Right? Why don't you at least maybe report it? Maybe you don't want a distraction. Okay, that's fair enough. But the fact that now he's walking that back and saying maybe we might do a trade, leaning toward doing it. It was definitely an affirmative all day long. It was, we're going to do a trade, we're going to do a trade, we're going to do a trade. Now it's like, I might do it. And I think Jerry Jones is in the right here, to be honest. I think last night was definitely just a massive step back in just every phase, every thought process here that you have to evaluate where you are as a team going forward. Now let's start with the good things. I thought from a personnel perspective, the Shoddy and Flus and the staffs across the board for the Cowboys, the position coaches, in terms of the changes they made, rotating guys in, I thought that was an outstanding move. Ezeraku and Clowney being starters, fantastic, right? We saw a lot of Kalen Carson during the game, guys, the young corner, right? Didn't see him get picked on a whole lot, but, I don't know how many times he was actually thrown at. I didn't see how poorly or well he played, but he was in the game and played a lot of football, right? We saw Zion Childress get in the game for a few reps when Marquise Bell got hurt. Marquise Bell had a disaster game once again at the safety position. Disappointing for him. Of course, it'll be good to get Malik Hooker back at that position going forward. Marquise Bell, unfortunately, doesn't look like a guy who can become a key depth piece. He's been bad the moment he stepped on in a reserve duty against Washington. He's had no big plays, no good plays whatsoever, no impact plays, and a lot of really bad ones. So it's disappointing to see from his perspective. Wanye Thomas, I think he didn't do anything spectacular, but I saw him do a few things, step up in the run game a little bit. So, again, not elite from Wanye Thomas, but I didn't see anything, at least at first glance, that was a disaster class. Reddy Stewart got more playing time, got a sack, right? In terms of run defense, it's hard to tell exactly how well or poorly he did on the edge. I know the edge run defense, again, was very, very poor. The middle between the tackles was actually solid from Dallas, aside from that one wham-bam concept where they creased Dallas right up the middle, which is kind of a trap kind of concept. Between the tackles, the run defense, again, Kenny Clark, Oso Digizua, Jay Toya, the rookie Jay Toya had actually, I think, an okay game from my perspective. It may have been his best game of his career up to this point. Solomon Thomas, even though he got beat up with some injuries a little bit, I thought inside they actually played a very physical physical game. And once again, that's kind of been the theme, actually. If you look at the Cowboys' run defense, in between the tackles, they're pretty solid. On the edges, they're just a disaster. And teams, and as you work your way through the season, teams start figuring these things out. The Broncos figured it out. They attacked the edges and absolutely eviscerated them, right? And we saw it last night when the Arizona Cardinals, when they ran the ball in between the tackles, it was a lot of winning for the Cowboys defensively all game long. But when they got the ball on the edges, it was just a lot of disaster all game long for the Cowboys run defense. And that's where they sit right here. And that's the linebacker position and the safety position and defensive end, of course. The linebacker group, Murray, Shamar James. Listen, Shamar James is my guy. I thought he stepped up and made some plays early on in his career, and I thought he had some good pressures as a blitzer. He had a tackle for loss. So I think there's still some, athleticism, some playmaking, but on a snap-by-snap basis, he's just not playing good football at all. He's struggling with reads in the run game. I think he missed a tackle as well. So it was probably Shamar James's worst game. He played poorly against Carolina as well, played poorly against Denver. Listen, he's just not playing good football. He's a fifth-round rookie for a reason, right? And listen, at this point, DeMarvion Overshown returning is obviously much needed for the linebacker position. But there's going to have to be some changes. And my first glance, to be honest with you guys, depending on what they do with any trades, is I think you sit Shamar James down, you put Overshown in his place, you have Leofeld be the outside linebacker, and you have Kenneth Murray be the green dot, even though he's struggled too, and just put Shamar James in certain situations where he can succeed. Limited snap counts, things like that. Let Overshown kind of take over that role. That would be my guess. And maybe eventually later in the season, you go back to Shamar James and Overshown inside and kind of bench Murray. Maybe that's what happens. But listen, Shamar James played poorly. Kenneth Murray played poorly. The cornerback position, Deron Bland had the worst game, I think, of his entire career. He's had games where he's gotten absolutely beat like a drum before. I look at the Seahawks game in 2023 as a great example of that. He just played poorly and gave up a lot of yards. I think against Seattle, he gave up well over 100 yards and a touchdown. Had his same big plays, same kind of effect here, but was also terrible tackling. Even against Seattle in 23, he came away with an interception. Made no good plays at all. It was Deron Bland, which is such a shame because he's done everything that's been asked of him, inside, outside, switching at schemes, becoming more of a tackler. He's been a really good tackler over the past month or so. Obviously, a pick six against Washington. But he just had a worst game of his career by far. And that was one of the things that was so disappointing watching the game just across the board, because it was the Cowboys' better players, at least on paper, that had really disappointing performances or gave up just bad plays. You look at Deron Bland with a disaster game, of course. You look at Javonte Williams, who played very, very hard and has a nice season, a disappointing fumble. It sucks, man. That just stinks. It's just one of those things. Ferguson, who's had a nice bounce back year, a drop pass and a fumble as well. That's tough to see. Obviously, Tyler Smith surrendered a bad sack. These are the good players, right? These are the guys having resurgent years. These aren't the rookies. These aren't, the guys that had stepped up due to injury. These are the starters, the key players. And they had either really bad plays or really bad games overall. And that's part of the problem. And that's why I think Jerry Jones, that comment right there, hey, to Jerryism for sure. I like our nuts and bolts. I don't like what's happening to our nuts and bolts, though. I think in a Jerry kind of way, he's not wrong, right? I think the core pieces of this team, there's some things to be excited about. But just if you turn it over to the offensive side of the football, guys, you can't score 10 points at home. Right, you can't. You won't beat anybody that way. It doesn't. You can have an elite defense, right? And scoring 10 points at home offensively ain't gonna cut it. Now you can argue, well, they should have kicked the field goals. Going for it on fourth down. I don't hate the calls at all, right? Because you have to. Because let's say even if they kick both those field goals, then what? It's 16. You scored 16 points at home, right? That's still well below the league average, and with this defense, still not good enough to win. Right. And listen, I understand if Williams doesn't fumble, they kick a field goal, they make it 27-20, with 3 or 4 minutes to go. Is it a different game? Maybe. But it's still a game where they offensively did very little. Offensive line was really poor throughout. Down the stretch, it got worse as the Cardinals defensive line could just tee off. And, it's going to happen, unfortunately, when you're in those games, in those situations where, and Dallas has been on the other side of that. You look at the Jets game, you look at the Commanders game where you're winning by 20 points, you're winning by 3 scores, you're winning by 2 scores in the final 3 or 4 minutes. And it's a full-on pass rush mode, party at the quarterback kind of thing. And unless you can get like the no-huddle offense going, the quarterback just doesn't stand a chance. It's tough to play O-line there. And listen, they didn't step up. Terrence Steele got replaced mid-game from Nathan Thomas. Steele was reportedly dealing with migraines. We may have a position battle going on there, guys. And that's, I think, a key from this roster going forward is going out of the bye week, Shawnee said this is a one-game season for a lot of people, and I think it will be the case. I think the Cowboys looked at a lot of players that played a lot of football the first half of the season, and it doesn't look like very many of them may play a lot of football the second half of the season, certainly on defense, right? May see a lot of Kalen Carson and Siobhan Revel in the secondary for Dallas, for example. Marquise Bell got his best opportunity of his career to become a starter, and he did not step up in any capacity. So that's disappointing from his perspective. Linebacker position, no idea what you do there. Defensive line's already undergoing a master overhaul, which I think is much needed, certainly at defensive end. Good to see that. Yeah, I mean, it was a dud of a performance. So you have to evaluate all your decision making and your thought process coming out of it, right? It just was one of those games where every sort of narrative and thought and any sort of, look, okay, how can we spin this positively as a football team? You leave that game and you're like, there ain't a whole lot to spin positively. There just isn't, guys. And that's unfortunate. All right, this next report is a post from Patrick Walker during the game, and I wanted to highlight this because I think it's important. It says, Cowboys defense is being booed in their own stadium. This is such a bad look. Yeah, it felt like that environment. I wrote at the time the boos were deserved. I mean, it was missed tackles. It was just, can't get off the field. And listen, to the defense's credit, right, their last 4 possessions of the game, they gave up a field goal. They got punt, and then a 4th down stop. And that was after surrendering the fumble to Devontae Williams, right? So that was, some of those possessions. One of them was after a 4th down the Cowboys didn't convert. One of them was after the Williams fumble. So to the defense's credit, they did turn it around and make things feisty down the stretch. So I want to give credit where credit is due. This was sort of the worst of it here later in the third quarter when it looked like Dallas was, really going to be just run out of their own building and had a very 2024 vibe to it. Remember when Houston obliterated Dallas, just pulled away late. Philadelphia pulled away late. Against Dallas, we saw, Detroit eviscerate Dallas at home. We saw on the road the 49ers and the Falcons pull away against Dallas in 2024. Dallas scored late in both of those games. Similar kind of vibe here to make it look closer. It felt like that. And the crowd was like, no, what the heck is this, guys? This is a pivotal moment going into your bye, and this is the performance you're putting on the field. This is the product. And I think the booing is fair. And to be totally honest, I know a lot of fans are booing the players for their execution, but we got to look at who's really responsible for all this in terms of the man in charge, where the buck stops, and that's Shoddy, right? Look, and I talked about this during the game a little bit on X. It says, listen, we gave Shoddy a lot of credit, deservedly so, for putting together a good performance against Philly Week 1, dealing with the adversity, bouncing back against Green Bay with a gutsy tie offensively. Credit to that. Going beat up by injuries, going on the road. Listen, New York Jets are bad, but still they were eviscerated and still scored 37 points, won the game. Good job there. Washington, again, great coaching job once again, dealing with injuries, big time performance there. But again, credit for him for those games. But this was just so poorly executed, poorly play called, poorly managed. I mean, penalties still a problem. It's every single element of coaching that was part of this game was not won by Shoddy. He was outcoached, and him and his staff, right? Collectively, you can lump it together. I know a lot of people criticize the 4th down call specifically. I don't, right? I think even if they kick field goals in both those situations, I still think they probably lose the game, right? Just defensively, they're just not good enough, right, for them to just settle for field goals. It's probably a different game, to be totally honest, right? It feels different down the stretch. But even again, if you lump those 2 made field goals into the Cowboys' ledger, I mean, which is obviously you really can't do that in terms of evaluating the game. But even if you do, just for argument's sake, it's not like they, outscored Arizona, right? The final was 27-23 if you had 6 points. And I think the approach was right in both cases, right? I mean, you've got all the money on the offense. Dak Prescott's paid a lot of money. Smith paid a lot of money. CeeDee Lamb played a lot of money. Ferguson paid a decent amount, not a whole lot. Pickens trying to get paid a lot of money, right? Turpin extended. Not paid a lot of money, but still. And that's what you got. I mean, red zone stops. Prescott. I mean, listen, Prescott was under pressure. He got pressured a lot. But even when he wasn't, he was off. Throws were late. Timing was off. And I think a lot of that is on the quarterback. And a lot of that is on the coaching. I think the Cowboys came into this game with a certain game plan and a focus, and they were completely unable to execute it. And now a lot of that, I think, is as the Cowboys try and zig when people zag to them. And, there are matchup issues, of course. And they move the football. So it's not like it was like, oh, my goodness. It wasn't like, some of the Cooper Rush games where it was like, man alive, they can't get first downs, right? It wasn't like that. I mean, they moved the football up and down the field, right? They had, They had the fourth down, two fourth down stops, a fumble, right? Two fumbles actually, where they moved all in Arizona territory, so they moved the football, but they couldn't convert those into scoring points. And that's what happened against Chicago. That's what happened against Denver. And it's a recurring theme when things go bad. They don't have the ability, very similar to 2023. And this is Dak Prescott's biggest problem of his entire career. And this is the one thing that separated Romo from him. Romo had the ability, and it's a double-edged sword, that when things were going bad, he could flip it on a switch and make things go good, doing a crazy athletic play or just start a crazy comeback, right? Now, the opposite was true with Romo as well. If things were going good, he could do something stupid and turn it bad very quickly. So it works both ways. But Dak Prescott has not shown the ability to kind of, okay, things are going bad, let's flip the script here, let's get things going. I mean, when's the last big comeback Prescott has had? Like in terms of double-digit second half, things are going bad. You're losing 24-7, 27-10, 28-13, whatever it is. When's the last time? His rookie year against Green Bay in the playoffs? That one comes to mind. But is there any other ones? I'm sure I'm missing something, right? I'm sure I'm missing one game where it was just, boy, they're getting killed and they turn it around. But help me out here, guys. I mean, maybe 2020 against the Giants, right? When they were down 17-3 early and they came back to win that game. But again, he got hurt that game. He didn't even finish that one, unfortunately, with that crazy injury. I mean, I'm trying to remember a game where things were going bad in the third and fourth quarter. Not like weird first quarter stuff, but third and fourth quarter, you're down by double digits. Hey, listen, the Mahomeses, the Allens, the Burrows, they all find ways to every once in a while pull these games out. When's the last time Prescott has done that? I can't remember. Right? I really can't remember. Even Seattle in 2023, that was a one-score game throughout, right? That was a close game throughout. I mean, that may be the one instance, maybe, but even that wasn't, a blowout that they had to, or a double-digit, triple-digit, or double-digit three-score defeat, or they were trailing by that amount where he had to come back. And so we saw the flaws of Prescott on display. Right, so it just became a game where a lot of the flaws and the warts, kind of like we saw how Denver exposed the total lack of talent on defense, and they made a lot of personnel changes to just get new guys out there to see what they could do, which was great. I thought that was smart, and I really appreciate it. But we also saw the warts on the offense. We saw the Dak Prescott warts really emerge, right? He was an MVP candidate, right? And people said, oh my goodness, he's having a great season. He's had, again, on pace, I think where he's going right now, he's on pace, 6 interceptions through 9 games? Guys, he's on pace for 11 or 12 interceptions. That's going to be bottom half of the NFL. His passing yards, I mean, they're not bad. His numbers aren't bad, guys. I'm not saying he's having a bad season, but I think reality is setting in. He had a couple of really great games. He's had some duds, and it's going to average out for him what we've seen from Prescott forever, which is good, not great, which means the infrastructure needs to be better around him offensively and defensively. I think the pieces are there on offense. I thought Lamb and Pickens, again, played pretty well, right? I mean, you can make an argument Pickens got a little silly there with some stupid stuff, but listen, with Pickens, you take the good with the bad, right? That's just the reality. I think CeeDee Lamb, I think he had, again, a really nice game overall, physical catches, yards after catch. He's just a tough guy, right? I think he was just put in a lot of situations with Prescott, with late throws and off-timing situations. Whether it was the call or whether it was Prescott or Lamb or all of them, right? I think everyone takes a piece in the blame, but I thought he did fine. I thought Ferguson was a mixed bag, unfortunately. I thought the running game, Williams did fine until the fumble, right? It was a good, hard run. He's been a really good player. It's unfortunate with the fumble because he's done so many things well for Dallas. Listen, I think there's just so many issues, so many warts that have revealed itself that this team right now, again, they're 3-5-1 for a reason, right? This is not a good football team. We'll talk about it as we work through the bye over the next couple of weeks, position group by position group, evaluating where this team is and where they could go. But any inclination of this being a playoff team or a playoff contending team, these last 2 weeks have basically put that to bed, right? This team is much closer to, people want to compare it to, say, 2024 or 2020. This feels like the 2004 Dallas Cowboys, if I'm being honest. Defensive warts, offensive issues, transition era, right? Bill Parcells year 2, he's stuck with the defense that he didn't really want to run. He wants to go 3-4. He goes 4-3 in 2004. Things fall apart. Offense has some issues, right? It's one of those things where, again, the Cowboys offense in 2004, when all things were considered through the first 4 or 5 games of the season, was actually ranked pretty highly. I don't know if you guys remember that or not with Vinny Testaverde. But the reality is we're seeing the warts come out. And this is just not a good football team, right? And this is with a special teams, winning the special teams game with a block punt touchdown, right? Not a good football team. The boos were deserving. Long story short. All right, this is from John Machota. This is Troy Aikman on 105 through the fan on Cowboys defensive coordinator Matt Eberflus. He's a good defensive coordinator. He's proven that over the years. The frustrating, I think, for him and for the organization in general is that he's called things to keep from giving up certain plays, and yet they've given up those exact plays. So it hasn't been a lack of calling the right scheme. It's just really been more than anything a lack of execution. Yeah, I mean, again, Aikman, he calls it correctly. He calls it as he sees it. He's not right 100% of the time, but he's right darn near close to it. And yeah, I thought Eberflus clearly showed once again that he is not. I don't know if he's the solution, but he's not the problem. I thought he called a great game, disguised blitzes, mixed up coverages, mixed up personnel. Right, did a really good job generating pressures. It's just the secondary had a disaster game. I mean, as a team, especially DeRon Bland specifically, Marquise Bell was bad. I mean, it just was one of those things where just everybody took a turn getting just beat and giving up bad plays in the secondary. And they got pressure on Brissett. I think 5 sacks, 11 quarterback hits. It was their, it was one of their better pass rush games for sure. Everybody got involved. Clowney, Ezraku, Kenny Clark, Osadiki-Zua got some pressures, got some hits, got some knockdowns. Clowney, right? It was a game where they got pressure on the quarterback. Shamar James on a blitz, I remember specifically got a hit or pressure, got 1 or 2 of them. So it was one of those things where they got some hits, they got some pressures. They really did a good job on Brissett in terms of pressuring the quarterback. And listen, the secondary was awful. And it's one of those things where at a certain point, Eberflus, who's I think doing a decent job, right? And far from perfect, but a decent job, all things considered. Again, I don't know if he's a long-term solution. I'm starting to feel like he is. I know as weird as that sounds watching that game, I did not feel like Eberflus was the problem. For the second straight week and the third week out of 4, I'm kind of like, I don't know if, or really, if you go back to really the Jets game, 4 out of 5, you're like, I don't know if Eberflus is really the issue here. And I think that's something that we can all start to realize as we work our way through the bye week. We'll have to see what this team looks like coming out of it. Obviously, they got some guys coming back. Overshown, Revel, Winfrey, right? They added Kalen Carson. Again, like I said, played a lot of reps. This defense is going to look completely different. Malik Hooker coming back at safety, right? This team's going to look just 100% different coming out of the bye as they did coming into it. But I think the reality is Eberflus has called a decent game. I mean, he's called decent games, plural. It just isn't enough. Talent just isn't there, at least across the board. All right, this next post is courtesy of John Machota once again before the game. I thought this was interesting. Cowboys owner Jerry Jones on Sirius XM while talking about Michael Irvin and DeMarcus Ware. Not one time, not even the hottest of 2-a-days in August in Texas. I never seen either one of those two go over and lay on a damn training table in front of 1 million people. Yeah, I mean, listen, I've talked about this a bunch. There's the image of Micah Parsons during the preseason game. Yeah, I do think that was Jerry Jones kind of let something slip here about the mindset and the frustrations. And when Michael Parsons did that, I think I've talked about this before. To me, it felt like the end with the Cowboys for sure. I thought it was disrespectful. I thought it was unprofessional. I thought that was a bad look from Micah Parsons, and it really showed a lot about him as a person and his character. To be totally honest, now that doesn't mean you trade him. It doesn't mean Jerry Jones is absolved of all the issues that happened with number 11, formerly number 11 with Dallas, and everything that happened in that whole situation, which we've talked about enough. It's just a sad deal how it ended up. But the reality is, this optic right there, that picture was so bad that this was the end right here. And looking back, hindsight, I think the moment this image in that preseason game against the Atlanta Falcons, the third preseason game, people fighting for their playoff, their NFL lives, not playoff lives, NFL lives, right? Are they going to sell insurance? Or are they going to be on an NFL roster? For Parsons to do that, and I do think saying, listen, Michael Irvin, DeMarcus Ware, and you could throw a bunch of guys in there that had fiery personalities, right? They never did something like this, and I think that's important to understand. You want to be a leader, you want to be a grown up, you want to be an adult, you want to get paid $48 million a year, $45 million a year. I mean, you can't do this, right? And listen, he's had a good season with Green Bay for sure, and the Packers are a really good team. But unless Micah Parsons turns this around in Green Bay and this attitude doesn't creep in, then Green Bay is going to run into the same issue in a couple of years, right? It's got a little bit of a T.O. vibe. Now that hindsight 2020, doesn't mean T.O. is not a Hall of Fame player. Doesn't mean he didn't do great things with Dallas and San Francisco and a bunch of other teams, Philadelphia. But it does speak to how his teammates and how the NFL and how the coaches and the ownership will perceive him. And listen, I'm rooting for Micah Parsons that he kind of cleans some of this stuff up. I wish no ill will against Micah. But I do think Jerry Jones does have a point here. I agreed with this. I said this at the time. All right, this next post is courtesy of Disco, which is just a Washington Commanders account. And I wanted to bring this up just to, misery is company, right? So the Commanders are struggling as well, much like Dallas. They had big expectations coming into the season, and they have fallen apart, fallen flat on its head. And Disco commented the Commanders spent 8 draft picks to acquire Laramie Tunsil, Marshawn Lattimore, and Deebo Samuel. 8 draft picks. I think currently they have 2 picks total in the first 5 or 6 rounds. So the Commanders went all in, right? The Commanders did what the people have been screaming for the Dallas Cowboys to do for years, like go all in, make the splash deals, right? And the Commanders did that. Laramie Tunsil, right? They drafted an offensive tackle first round to help even more on the offensive line, right? They went out and got Deebo Samuel, a veteran, to help them push over the top. They went out and added Marshawn Lattimore, another corner, veteran corner, right? They looked at their defense. They're already one of the older teams in football. They got even older, right? They committed all in, gave a lot of draft picks for it, right? You can see 8 draft picks. They have very few going forward, and they're 3-6, right? They're basically in the same boat as Dallas, and now their quarterback is hurt, right? And Jay Daniels, hope he gets a speedy recovery. That was a gnarly elbow injury the other night. But it does speak, again, when you go all in and go hyper aggressive, that can be the risk sometimes, right? It's Commanders, they went super aggressive. They're really old. They're going to get older. And because of that, they're beat up with injuries. Older teams get hurt more, statistically speaking. Makes sense. And now they don't have the draft capital trying to rebuild the roster on the back end. It'll take them a few years to do that. Doesn't mean the Commanders will stink going forward, right? But we've seen, again, that Dan Quinn head coach, great turnaround artist, phenomenal turnaround artist, right? With what he did in Dallas defensively, what he did with the Atlanta Falcons, and what he did with Washington last year. But it's clear that there's a sustainability problem, at least the way it sits right now, with Dan Quinn. We saw it in Atlanta, we saw it with Dallas, and now we're seeing it with Washington. There's something about how Dan Quinn works and builds and coaches where teams respond and they just find a way to play better than their talent and really just surprise people. But over time, the warts of his coaching style and his approach show themselves, and it seems like Washington may be on that path. And unfortunately for the Commanders, they don't have the draft picks to support it. So I guess I'm just trying to say, take solace, Cowboys fans, and as bad as things look, and they look really, really bad in a lot of phases, at least the Cowboys, right, didn't mortgage their entire future, right? Imagine if they had signed Micah Parsons to a massive deal and then traded away a bunch of picks to add another corner. Imagine if they had traded picks for Marshawn Lattimore or something like that, right? It's one of those things. The trade Dallas did make with Pickens, at least he's a younger player. At least he's got theoretically a long career in front of him. The Washington Commanders went heavy with the veterans that are towards the end. They went all in with guys with playoff experience and a lot of experience in general. And it hasn't worked out for them, and now they don't have the draft picks to build it on the back end. So it can always, I guess, right now anyway, be worse. All right, this next comment is from Brandon Laurie. He posted this on X. Adam Schefter, unprompted, mentioned Cowboys Mozzie Smith as a possible trade candidate right before the deadline when teams usually unload guys for whatever they can get back. This is the second day in a row that Smith is mentioned by an NFL insider. It's one of those interesting things. I could see a team taking a flyer on Mozzie Smith, like 6th or 7th round pick. Just, all right, yeah, he's a first round talent. Yeah, he's played football. He started a lot of games. And maybe let's see what he can do, right? You could see a team like the Bengals or, a team like that where it's like, we like his physical gifts. Maybe he just needs to change the scenery. Kind of like Kaiir Elam, right? The way the Bills, the Cowboys picked up Kaiir Elam, like, we'll see what he can do. And I think you may find a team that'll do that with Mozzie Smith. And the fact that multiple insiders have said it, again, it could all come from the same source, right? All of these insiders, rely a lot on agents and some executives to kind of push forward narratives. But I do think the fact that it's being mentioned a lot, I feel like Mozzie Smith is no longer a Dallas Cowboy. I think he's either cut or traded. We'll know by the Tuesday afternoon. We'll know by this afternoon where Mozzie Smith sits at the Dallas Cowboy. But the fact that they played Jay Toya a lot and Perrion Winfrey is coming back off of IR, there's no room for Mozzie Smith. So for me, it's like, listen, flip him for a 6th or a 7th and just move on. I think that would be the right move to make. All right, and finally here, I just want to highlight something that's been going around. Adam Schefter posted, any YouTube TV customers can get to keepmynetworks.com to find options to watch NFL Live, Monday Night Countdown, and Monday Night Football on ESPN and ABC tonight. Obviously, there's a debate between YouTube TV and Disney, the House of Mouse, that, of course, owns ABC and ESPN. And there's a blackout right now because they didn't agree to terms. So YouTube TV, which would get that channel normally, do not get any of those channels currently, at least by the moment of time I'm recording this video. Maybe it's changed. And I do think it's kind of shady and a little disgusting. I think that ESPN and ABC and Disney are trotting out their employees both on social media and publicly. They've done this during their shows, basically saying like, hey, listen, go and vote to talk about how bad YouTube TV is. No, I don't have a dog in the fight. I don't care. YouTube TV could be bad. I'm not a fan of Alphabet, Google in terms of some of the things they've done in the past, business practices. Now, I say this on YouTube. I'm very grateful for YouTube. I just think that the parent company Alphabet has made some interesting decisions, but so has ABC and Disney. They made some interesting decisions, right? So it's one of those things where I look at both things and say, okay, Alphabet, they're not a flawed or they're not a flawless organization. I'm a big fan of YouTube, like I said, but I think some other things they've done very interesting. I think ABC obviously has their flaws as an organization as well. Disney, ABC, ESPN have their flaws. So again, I really don't have a dog in the fight. I really don't care. I've got cable, so just to avoid things like this for no other reason. But I really say I don't like. I think it's a bad look for Disney to trot out their employees as a front-facing part of their company to say, hey, listen, we're good. We're the good guys. When ESPN also has an app, right? ESPN has an ESPN Plus app. They're trying to get people on a $60 a month subscription or whatever it is, $30 a month subscription, get a bunch of people to sign up for it so they can jack up the price, right? We know this game. It's happened in the subscription services now for the past year or two. They get you hooked in and then they jack up the price. So I don't appreciate Disney kind of not mentioning that part, saying, listen, sign up for our app, go on and go tell YouTube TV they need to agree to our terms because otherwise you can't watch football. And by the way, we're going to jack up the price on our streaming service. I don't really like that. And I think it actually hurts their cause rather than help it. I think Disney is not someone that people look at, as a strong brand name in terms of being trustworthy and loyal the way they did maybe 20, 30 years ago. I think the vibe is very different right now, but we'll see how it all shakes out. All right, let's get to the comments here. This is from It's Juma3231, member comments. I always start with members. Big shout out to my members. I really appreciate you guys. My promise is I will get to every member comment, and I'll get to every member comment first. This is from, again, It's Juma3231. The comment on injuries irked me as a rehab engineer. This is how that comment had read to me. Why didn't we throw BB into the fire his first week back against the best D-line in the league after missing 6 weeks, but we were okay playing him against the 5-sack non-blitzing Cardinals? Let's use some critical thinking, people. The Broncos were a team they could have beat, but was always leaning Broncos. The Cardinals and Raiders are must-wins if they want a chance at the playoffs, so that's why BB is playing this week. As for the migraines, picture the worst hangover you ever had and multiply it by 10. Equilibrium is off, vision is blurry, lights can have flaring effects. It can feel like someone is both squeezing your head while slamming into it with a sledgehammer. Then right when you think it's done, boom, it's back, but worse. In what world do you send a player onto the field in that condition? It would not only be dangerous for him, but also his teammates around him. Thank God forbid he lets him play on coverage. Why he's on the field if he can't see? If he's not healthy, don't play. I can hear it now. He's been practicing. He's been trying to go out there, but the organization is protecting him from himself so he can have a future in and out of football. Anyone saying suck it up and play needs to question what they value in life because health is nothing to take for granted. Again, this goes back to a comment I made a few days ago. Players are people. They get paid millions because they're the best, not to entertain you. And if you disagree, you have other leagues you can watch with less talent. Shout out to Shawnee and his staff for protecting their players, even if it's unfavorable to the game plan. Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, right? To me, it's like, listen, I've never had a migraine, at least as far as I know. I'm assuming I would know if I had one. But everything that was described to me from Wanye Thomas's, it's a vision thing, right? Just on that alone, forget the pain and the issues. Like, if you have blurry vision, you can't play. Are you kidding me? And with Cooper Beebe, listen, this is a guy who was supposed to be a 6-week injury-ish. These high ankle sprain and broken bones, these can last for like multiple months. So again, take it easy, right? It's a second-year player. Right? What do you want to rush them out against Denver? Right? And now we know this Cowboys team after the Arizona Cardinals performance, which you alluded to, right, would probably essentially to make the playoffs almost had to win this one, right? The way the NFC is shaking out. So again, it's not like it did them any good if they would have rushed him out because, maybe he would have gotten re-injured, his future would have been hurt, and the Cowboys certainly would not have beaten Denver if he would have played and didn't even beat Arizona when he did play. Talking about Cooper Beebe, and you could throw Wanye Thomas in there as well. So yeah, I mean, I agree with you 100% there. I think people, demand these players to play if, I deserve to watch you play football, and I deserve the right to criticize you when you don't play up to my standard, which of course you can criticize players. I do it. We all do it. But the reality is these are human beings. These are people that have futures, and they've got families, and they've got, obligations. And the thing is, if they can't see from a migraine, or if they're not 100% back from a broken foot after 6 weeks, give it a week. Give it a few days. I mean, come on, guys. This isn't the Super Bowl. This isn't like it'd be even the Super Bowl, a little questionable, but that could make an argument. Listen, this is the biggest game. You have a whole off season to heal up if necessary, right? If there's any issues, there may be an argument. Because even from a player's perspective, right? If it's a Super Bowl, he has a great game. He becomes a great story. I mean, that could be worth tens of millions of dollars extra to him, right? So even from the player's perspective, it could make sense. But come on, for a regular season game, for a bad football team, doesn't make sense. Chris Oldham writes, sneaky good trade, Jordan Brooks, middle linebacker, Dolphins, dream trade, Quinnen Williams, Jets. I've actually liked Brooks for a long time. I think he's one of those underrated players because I don't think he's like a superstar. I don't think he's a huge playmaker, but all he does is just do solid plays, right? He makes a lot of good tackles. He's not an impact player, but he's honestly the kind of player the Cowboys need at middle linebacker. So I don't disagree with you. If the Cowboys had Brooks instead of Kenneth Murray, that would be an upgrade for sure, right? He's kind of a guy that just does his job. Nothing special, nothing flashy. I like Brooks. I actually really would. I don't know if the Dolphins are willing to trade him, but I actually like him as a player. Robert Bass, 3667, writes, Nick, I agree concerning too much reliance on stats. I am concerned about tonight's game against the Cardinals. Hey, you were right to be. They lost 5 games by a total of 12 or 13 points. We have lost 7 of the last 8 against Arizona. We do not seem to match up well against them like Denver. We are favored tonight. I think they were 3-point favorites, so it was pretty close. I just hope we find a way to win before the bye. After the Raiders, we have 5 games against powerhouse teams. It would be semi-miraculous to finish 10-6-1, which might be enough to sneak into the playoffs. But apart from miraculous play, we could easily stack up several losses in a row. But maybe we have a miraculous last half of the season. That is what it will take, in my humble viewpoint. What do you think? Well, obviously, we now have the data point of the Monday night debacle, right? And in terms of getting just beat up. Now, listen, I agree with you. The Cardinals, they were 2-5, and the Bill Parcells-ism, you are what your record is. I think that is true. But to be fair, I mean, they clearly were better than the Titans. They blew that one up with one of the worst collapses I've ever seen, right? They should have beaten the Packers. The Packers had to come from behind late to beat them, right? You look at a lot of their games coming down to the absolute wire. It's very realistic. You could see the Cardinals, especially if they had gone to Brissett earlier, because Murray had really struggled, right, for the first month of the season or so. Brissett has played really good football, and Brissett has kind of been a stabilizing influence. There's a good argument to be made. They're 3-4 or 4-3, right, heading into last night. So this is a team that, I understand you are what your record is, but this is year 3 of their regime, right? 2023, when they beat Dallas, too, by the way, in Arizona, they were kind of frisky and fun. Year 1, 2024, they took a step forward, kind of disappointed down the stretch. 2025 was supposed to be the Cardinals' breakout year, right? They had the talent, they had a lot of players, maturity, added some key guys throughout the draft. They looked like they were going to be in a great position, and they had just disappointing defeat after disappointing defeat after disappointing defeat. So they're not a bad football team, right? And it's the NFL. There are very few really bad football teams, right? Outside of maybe, the Browns and the Jets, right? I mean, how many are there really, right? I mean, the Giants have 2 wins, but they're very frisky, of course. I mean, even the Dolphins have 2 wins, and they're struggling, but they destroyed Atlanta, right, a few weeks ago. So the NFL it's a tight business. It's a tough business. Listen, the Cardinals smoked Dallas, right? And like you said, they needed a miraculous, string of play to avoid a run of losses here. And I mean, listen, we saw it last night. Like, listen, I appreciate the personnel changes the Cowboys enacted, but their offensive line play, Dak Prescott, shoddy. I mean, across the board, this was not a good game. I mean, this is a huge indicator right here that this Cowboys 2025 team, this is a bad football team, guys. This is not a good football team. This is a very bad football team. And they've got a lot of things to try and figure out. But this is a bad group of players. Let's be totally honest here, right? Let's call a spade, right? They've got some stars. They've got Tyler Smith, who's good. BB's good. Booker's a good rookie, right? I think Lamb and Pickens are good players. I think Prescott is good, not great. But if you go over to the defense, right, I mean, even their good players, Deron Bland was awful. Ezra Rocku's a bright piece. Kenny Clark and Oso Digizua have been solid at times. But really, you're looking at half their defense is C to D players, half their starting defense, right? And they're trying to figure it out. I get they have Overshown returning Revel, Kalen Carson got in the mix, right? Safety position is going to get healthier, so they're going to go from like D at safety to like C minus at safety. So I guess there's some improvement maybe there. But the reality is this is just a bad football team, and they showed it last night. All right, this next comment is from David Dobbins, 5887, laughing at my Cameron Saran comment, talking about how how listen, if I need to go to get a graduate level course in stats and the Nash equilibrium and game theory to understand the analytics you're trying to sell, then it's probably come on, it's football, right? He also wrote, to all those people wanting Flus gone after half a season, you must have really hated our 1989 coach. Like, comment, subscribe, hype. Yeah, there always is that context, right? You never really know. I mean, Landry's record through the first 6-7 years was disastrous. I know different eras, but still, I mean, Mike McCarthy was 3-9 through 12 games. Obviously, he didn't win anything, but he went 36-15 over a 3-game stretch there. Jason Garrett, right? Remember Garrett? I mean, he started off 5-3 as an interim, and he went 8-8 his first season. So I mean, and Wade Phillips, of course, he started off right 13-3, 9-7. It was he won 22 games his first 2 seasons. So, does year one success result in a long run of wins? Not necessarily, right? There's been points to the positive and points to the negative on both sides of it here. I mean, Barry Switzer's teams got worse, right? There's just no way of knowing. But I will say right now, again, there were some good coaching performances the first 6-7 games of the season for Shoddy, for sure. And he deserved credit where credit is gave him, and I gave him a lot of credit. Now we look at this last 2 games, and specifically last night, and for the first time, his stock is declining. Now, I'm not saying, he should get fired. I'm not saying he's a dud. But for the first time, we're looking at Brian Schottenheimer and everything he's tried to do, and I think there's a lot I really like. We're looking at him as a coach and saying, listen, man, you're not getting it done. You're getting outcoached multiple times. Now, to be fair to Schottenheimer, there's been no, Jason Garrett, what were you thinking moments, right? It hasn't been disaster, right? And that's fair, right? And let's be honest here. And the problem with Shoddy that he's trying to do right now is maybe he's there's so much volatility, so much change, so many position battles, so many lineup changes, right? Benching Jaden Blue, for example, last night, right? Which we'll talk about more over the course of the week. I think it's one of those things where there's just so much volatility. It's hard to develop continuity as a play caller and a strategist. You rely on a lot of times just Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb and Pickens to do really good things, and they certainly have at times this season for sure. But I think last night, and against Denver too, although Denver's a little bit understandable because on the road, Denver's a good team. That was just a matchup debacle for Dallas with their injuries defensively. Didn't stand a chance in that one, hindsight. But this game was just, especially in the big moments, right? The big moments, the Cowboys were outcoached and outplayed by Arizona, right? It could have been a different game down the stretch. Arizona was certainly better than Dallas, clearly. They led the entire game. They never trailed. But I do think Shoddy's stock, for the first time since he was hired, his stock, I think, is on the decline. Now, again, it doesn't mean he's a dumpster fire coach. I'm not saying fire Shoddy or give up on him. But I think if you want an overreaction to this game, this is the first time where we're like, okay, let's take a step back on Shoddy and let's think about this thing. Because, that was not a good performance. So let's see what he does. Let's see how he bounces back from here. Listen, give him at least 3 seasons, of course, right? I'm not saying, listen, it's time for him to go. But I do think you have to sit there and say and if you gave credit to him for some early games, you got to put some blame on him here for this one. I think that's just being honest. All right, this next comment here is from WM David Hamilton. A stud interior run stopper is cheaper and would turn a weakness into a strength. Yeah, I don't disagree with the thought. The problem is, and the data supports this, and I think when you watch the games, I got the same feeling too, is that in between the tackles, they're fine. Right? In some cases, they make some plays, right? I'm not saying they're like elite at stopping the run in between the tackles, but Clark, Odigizua, Solomon Thomas, right? Certainly in the A gaps, but even as you get between the tackles, I think they're okay stopping the run, generally speaking. On the edges, they're so bad. They are so bad stopping the run, and it's one of those things where that's linebacker play, that's defensive end play, and that's safety play primarily, and that to me is the bigger area, right? Defensive end, linebacker, safety. Overshown coming back. That's like a plus. Okay. All right. Malik Hooker, he's played, but he hasn't been great this season. Donovan Wilson's played, hasn't been great this season. So I wouldn't mind a safety there potentially. I also think defensive end is a big position of need, but at a certain point, you already have Ezeraku. I think you look at who's available. I think if you can get a Chubb, I'm on board with Bradley Chubb for sure. But I don't want a 1-year rental. There's talk about Hendrickson potentially. If you could get Hendrickson and extend him, because he's going to be an undrafted free agent, unrestricted free agent after the season. If it can be almost like a sign and trade, right? Hey, listen, 3-year deal. Come here. We'll give you a lot of money up front, big signing bonus this year plus the next 2. I'm on board with something like that. Don't want 1 year rentals, though. Don't want 1 year rentals. Right now, the Cowboys need to focus 100% on basically who can help us win in 2027. Let's create a 3 year plan here, guys. If we're going to invest in a program and a culture, which right now I think has to be the focus, that's what the Cowboys said before the season when they traded Parsons away for those draft picks. 2027 has to be the target year in terms of trying to be back into contention, right? It ain't 2025, obviously. 2026, hopefully some steps forward. Now's the time, though, if you're going to make a trade, they're backing away from that a little bit. If you listen to Jones's comments, we'll have to see what happens today. Focus on not 1 year rentals. If they get a 1 year rental, guys, I may lose it. Right now, of course, if they bring in a guy and they sign him, that's different, of course. But if they bring in a guy for 1 year and they let him walk, gosh, that would be so frustrating. All right, at the Mayus, hopefully I'm pronouncing that correctly, writes, I think you're misunderstanding Karen Soren's point. I don't think that he wants more consumers of analytics to know game theory and Nash equilibria, but rather for more producers of analytics data to know them and consider their effects. He's not asking for more educated audiences, but more thoughtful analysis. And that may be the case, but it's one of those things. If someone has to explain to me what you're trying to get the point across, especially for something like analytics, which is sort of new to the game and new to the field and sort of a tough data point to try and get people involved in, right? And again, I'm an engineer. I like data. I like all that stuff. I start every day with the stat of the day, but I also played football in college, right? It's meatheads bashing each other for 3 hours, right? That's football at its fundamental core. If you're trying to insert a lot of analytics and data and modeling into that fundamental core, and now you're trying to sell me on all these points, and it's a confusing process, and you're like, no, he didn't mean this. He meant actually that. Listen, at a certain point, you got to make it easy for me, right? Listen, football doesn't need analytics. Analytics needs football, right? So if you're trying to get involved in the game, make it easy for it to get involved in the game. And I think that's my overarching point there. David Moses 884 writes, I've seen enough of a Dan Quinn defense to know he can't stop the run. Glad he is gone. As far as our defense is concerned, I want to give Eberflus more time, but it looks like everyone has regressed. That gives me concern. You know, it's interesting. People have said people have regressed, but who has regressed, right? I mean, Deron Bland has, going into last night, he actually had a decent season. He played awful last night. You could say Trayvon Diggs, but Diggs has had injuries going back to 2023. So we have no idea what Diggs is, right, in terms of a player. You know, we don't know if that's Eberflus in the scheme or just Diggs with injuries, right? You look at the safety position. I honestly think guys like Donovan Wilson were covered up by an aggressive, hyper-aggressive Dan Quinn attacking defense, if we're being totally honest. He's never been a great coverage safety, ever. He's basically been a blitzing in the box safety that never had to do traditional safety stuff, right? So I think that's an important thing to keep in mind. I mean, listen, Shamar James is a rookie, right? Leofau is a thrill a minute as a physical player, right? He wasn't around with Dan Quinn. Murray wasn't around with Dan Quinn, right? Oso Odigizua, again, he kind of benefited playing next to Parsons. I don't think he's any better or worse. He was never great against the run to begin with. As a pass rusher, he's just facing more double teams, so he's not getting as many opportunities. I still think he's the same player. You can make an argument Dante Fowler for sure, but he's also getting older, right? So, and I know I'm throwing out some excuses there, definitely, but people talk about, the progression, and I think there's just such an overhaul of talent, right? The great unwinding, as I called it, of the team that Dan Quinn and the Cowboys front office built for that defense, right? Hyper-aggressive, blitz, attack, downhill, jump every route, and you look around and you're like, okay, where are those guys? Right, where are those downhill guys, right? And the reality is, remember Marquise Bell? This is something I'll never forgive Dan Quinn for, by the way. Leighton Vander Esch got hurt and says, okay, we're going to go with a young linebacker, Damone Clark, who has been benched for 2 years since Dan Quinn left, basically. 2 different DCs with experience, Zimmer, and now Eberflus has said, Damone Clark, not a good football player, and he went with Marquise Bell, who has been a disaster at safety this year, and he's like, we're going to put him at linebacker. I mean, you don't give yourself a chance. I mean, that was a team that I think was very, very flawed as time went on to tell. But I tell you what, those decisions just gave them no chance against good competition. And I put that blame on Dan Quinn and the front office too. Let's see here. Peter Hunt, 6480, writes, that Mozzie Smith draft pick ruined this team. The guy that went after him, Anton Harrison, offensive left tackle from Oklahoma, would have solidified that position as Tyron Smith's heir apparent. Yeah, I don't disagree. The Mozzie Smith pick was such a dud, and it did derail so much of this team's strategy. If Mozzie Smith was halfway competent, was a solid player, it changes the calculus at so many positions. And that's the problem with the Cowboys when they were so top-heavy and they were, just weren't they had built a good offense and they had talent, but they're getting older on the offensive line, right? They didn't have that good number two opposite CeeDee Lamb, right? It became one of those things clearly that they needed a youth movement on the offensive front, especially that offensive line. Running back position had gotten really old, right? Then Tony Pollard left. It became one of those things where defensive line, they needed just a couple picks to hit. They needed Sam Williams, as we saw this year, to hit. They needed Marshawn Kneeland to hit, Mozzie Smith to hit. They needed two of those three to basically be good, solid players. Not necessarily superstars, but competent starters. And all three of them, Mozzie Smith, total bust, Sam Williams, that blunt punt notwithstanding, and of course Marshawn Kneeland, have been duds, essentially, right? And I'm not trying to be mean here. I just think based on what the Cowboys, in terms of draft capital, gave up, second and first rounders, and that's left them really bare. Right, it's left them in a position right now where they just are just trying to figure things out with personnel. Right, one of the reasons why they might make a trade. Right, again, if you draft three defensive ends in the first, second round, right, and you look at 2022, 2024 and 2025, right? If you look at Williams, Kneeland, and then you look at Ezraku, and then of course you drafted Mozzie Smith in the first round. So you have literally four defensive linemen you drafted in the first two rounds, going back to the last four seasons, and three of them are duds. It forces you to trade for Kenny Clark. It forces you to have to make an addition, maybe another veteran defensive end, right? Whereas if you hit on the picks, they don't even have to be stars. If they're just solid players, it gives you more flexibility because those are cheap players that are doing good things, and they missed on those picks. And it's one of those things. If you hit on them, it's great. You hit on Travis Frederick, you hit on Tyron Smith, you hit on Zach Martin, you do that, everything looks wonderful. But again, let's say here Travis Frederick had been a dud. Let's say if he had stunk, completely different team, right? Completely different team, of course, right? So the difference is sometimes, I agree with you here, one or two hits in the draft, especially if he's a good young player, can just make all the difference in the world. And the drafting failures on the Cowboys defensive line for a number of years really reared its ugly head this season. And listen, it's just the way it is right now. And now they're trying to scramble and figure it out. All right, that's the comments for today, guys. Listen, I mean, it's tough, right? I mean, losing brings clarity. Like I've said that a bunch of times. I think that's a truism. I think we now know this offense. There's a lot of people that said it's a championship offense. They just need to play better defense. Well, that's back-to-back weeks, right? Dak Prescott has left the game with 17 points on the board, with I think how many turnovers did they have against Denver? 2 turnovers, 3 against Arizona, right, with that final interception. So back-to-back weeks, this great offense has left the game with Dak Prescott leaving the game with 17 points and 5 total turnovers. That's not going to get it done. Back-to-back poor games from Prescott. Really, I mean, he's just not playing good football. It's not all his fault. Shawnee deserves some of the blame. Offensive line deserves a lot of the blame as well. Players got to hold on to the football. Ferguson, Williams, right? It's one of those things where there's enough blame to go around. And I think that, to me, is the most disheartening thing, is that so many people played poorly, so many people made bad mistakes that are like the good players, where it's like, man, the margin for error. Dallas needs a lot of their good players to play at a high level consistently just to compete, right? Because they've got talent issues on defense. Listen, I like the fight in the defense down the stretch. I really do. I think Fluke's called a good game. Honestly, thought through almost 3 quarters, I'm like, this defense looks like they've given up, right? That they've looked phased out. But the young guys, Carson, Reddy Stewart, even Dante Fowler, Ezraku, right? Competed hard to the very end, played their butts off. It's one thing I will say about this Cowboys team, at least defensively, it's not from a lack of effort, right? I really don't think that's what it is, generally speaking, right? I think they play very hard. They play very, they try to play physical. They're flying downhill. And again, when you have a bunch of young guys, right, who are trying to make their NFL careers, right, you're going to get that. The problem is you're going to get duds. You're going to get Marquise Bell just not getting it done. Shamar James playing a lot of bad football. I think he's made some plays, but just generally bad football. Reddy Stewart making some plays. So there's some things to like for sure, but there just isn't much talent there defensively, and offensively it was such a poor execution game, poor play called game that it just didn't give much of a chance. But anyway, we'll see what happens today. Obviously, trade deadline. No 1-year rentals, please. It's one thing if you trade for a guy and then lock him up long term. I'm okay with that. But you only have one franchise tag, and Pickens seems to be the guy for that most likely. We'll see what happens, right, guys? And trying to find something positive here to end on. And I think the reality is for the Cowboys, the positive is that they've got a path forward. In 2024, at this time, right, they were 3-5. Dak Prescott got hurt. I'm sorry, they were 3-6. Dak Prescott was hurt. They had gotten killed in the vast majority of their games, right? I mean, I think at that point, 4 of their 6 losses had been just absolute blowouts. You look at, of course, the Saints game, the Ravens game was a blowout, they made close. The 49ers game was a blowout, they made close. Lions, Falcons was a blowout, they made close. They got smacked by Houston and Philadelphia. So they were 3-6. Actually, I think they hadn't played Houston yet. So 3-6 with, basically 4 of their 6 games were total routes, and a couple of games down the stretch they had made close at the end, made the score look closer than the game actually was. So I will say, and that was with no extra first round picks. That was no extra draft capital. So right now, I think the Cowboys have a better path forward. I still think Shoddy he's gone from A- to B in my mind, B+ in my mind, and we'll see what he does the rest of the way. Right, it's going to be a challenge for sure. But listen, now's the time coming out of the bye. Now's the time to see what this team looks like. Overshown will be back, supposedly. Revel should be back. And we'll see, we'll see what he looks like. We'll see what moves they make at the trade deadline. We'll see what changes they make, right? And it's going to be a multi-year process. It's disappointing performance-wise. You'd like to play feisty and close and competitive and not play poorly like you did against Arizona. But listen, it's going to happen sometimes, and we're going to see what they do when they bounce back. And a lot of pressure here on Shawnee, Prescott, and across the board here. Listen, back-to-back duds for a supposedly good offense ain't going to cut it, right? And we'll see what they do going forward, coming out of the bye and beyond. And we'll be here to talk about it, as always, each and every day. And until then, starting tomorrow, of course, I am Nick, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection.